I've always thought of masturbation as one of those things that everyone does, but no one really talks about. It is private, it's personal, and depending on who you ask, it's either healthy self care or something you're supposed to feel guilty about. To be perfectly honest, I am quite a fan of solo sex. Saying that, I've never really owned a sex toy until recently. Anna Lee, after one of our recent episodes, actually sent me one of her Lioness vibrators. I wasn't sure if I'd ever actually use it, but let's just say, for the sake of science, I may have done some field research. So, yeah, thanks, Anna. But, I used to be the kind of person who'd really die inside if anyone mentioned the word masturbation around me. It wasn't shame exactly, more like embarrassment mixed with quite a bit of, please don't make eye contact with me. And yet, here I am on a podcast talking about it publicly. So, progress? Still, I've got some questions. Is masturbation actually healthy? Can it help your sex life or quietly distract you from it? And why does it feel so much easier for men to talk about it than women? Well, today I'm speaking to Danielle Bezalel, or DB, the host of Sex Ed with DB and a public health researcher who spent years studying the science of self-pleasure. She began with her own 3-week experiment, which grew into a major study with sex toy company Magic Wand, exploring how masturbation affects our bodies, mood, and relationships.
Pleasure is a human right, and we should treat pleasure just as importantly as we treat our other parts of our life that make us happy people.
I'm Sahar, a journalist on a quest to understand the world through the lens of how people do sex.
Do you know what? If someone told me years ago, because I was born in Iran, if someone told me that you would be going on the record in a public space to talk about masturbation, I would literally die. So this is quite a big step.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've said the word masturbation like 1 billion times when I was introducing you at this episode. So tell me, what is your favorite word for masturbation?
Ooh. I mean, I do really enjoy the phrase flicking the bean, but recently, I think my most recent kind of fave is jilling off. Specifically, when we're talking about women or people with vulvas masturbating, instead of jacking off, it's jilling off.
Oh, my mom's name is the Farsi version of Jill, so
Oh
that I
no!
will
Oh
not be
no!
using it. No, thank you.
Hey, sorry to tell you, but your mom probably masturbates. Most of our moms probably masturbate, and I think it's okay, and we can be okay with that. That's
Do you
step
know what?
one.
It is okay, and I want to properly talk to you about it. But even as someone who is a huge advocate for it, I'm like, let's fucking talk about it, right? Like, even
Right.
the thought of my mom doing it is just so icky. Like, I think I'm more okay with my mom having sex than it's not that I want to think about
Then
her in any
masturbating, that's
sexual scenario.
interesting.
Yeah, why is that?
Why is that? Why are we more comfortable thinking about our I mean, I think because we put ourselves maybe at the center. We're like, well, they had sex and they had me, so that's cool. But I think with masturbating, especially for women and queer people, people with vulvas, like we have been taught in many ways that that is inappropriate and that that is like weird and gross when girls do it, for example. But it's so embedded in our culture, in our language, in our media, that it's okay when guys, people with penises do it. So I think that that's part of it. I think it's just like this discomfort that we have.
Yeah, I mean, it's a given. Like boys, when when we were growing up in school, it was fine. It was a given. It was kind of like you didn't talk about it as openly, but you knew it was happening. And even moms are okay talking about their boys doing it. Whereas with girls, it just there seems to be this whole thing around it. I mean, with vaginas, vulvas, there is always a lot of shame and stigma and control attached to it anyway. But I think when it comes to masturbation in particular, or jilling, a word I will never ever use ever. I think that's definitely the case. So tell me, what counts as masturbation? Like, how do you define masturbation?
I define masturbation as the touching of one's own genitals for pleasure. I think that there are a lot of ways that we can touch our own genitals. We can do it with fingers, we can do it with different kinds of toys. Some people like to grind on certain objects in order to masturbate. So, yeah, it could be a pretty simple definition, but I think it means something to so many different people. And I'm sure for most people, the first thing it means is shame because of the way that we were brought up, because people were brought up in religious households, or because of whatever culture that they were brought up in. So it's important for me as a sex educator to try to decouple the word masturbation from the word shame.
Why do you think that is? And why do you think it's more so for girls and women?
I think that specifically speaking to my American culture, I grew up
Mm.
in New York. I grew up in a Jewish family, Jewish household. And so it's hard for me to necessarily speak to the religious aspects, but I think that in Christianity and Catholicism, even in Orthodox Judaism, of course, in all religions, really, there is kind of emphasis on purity for women and virginity and making sure that she remains for her husband, right? In this very heteronormative, cisgender, patriarchal society that we live in. So if we allow women and people with vulvas to access their own pleasure, God forbid, what is that going to look like and what's going to happen, right? And even also when we think about certain words in our culture, right? Like I was even looking this up the other day to make sure it hadn't changed, but the word fart, for example, right? It's like an informal word, but that's just what it is. It's just since everyone has a butthole, I guess it's appropriate. But the word queef is vulgar in the dictionary. And it's simply because it comes out of a vagina, right? Like that it's the same thing. Like air is
That's so
coming out
true.
of a hole. And just because it's out of a vagina, then it literally says in the definition of the word vulgar, like slang, right? So I think that through words and through our culture, we have kind of really this embedded sexism around women in particular and their pleasure. And so I think when it comes to masturbation, women and girls are not taught that this is normal, this is healthy. Here's a safe way to do it. They're not encouraged to buy sex toys because it's such a hush hush industry and it's not regulated. There's so many different things. But I think to kind of put it concisely, our culture and our media and our religious backgrounds in many ways kind of suppress women's pleasure, and that includes encouragement to masturbate.
And, unfortunately, as in the very short space of time that we've spoken, I have admitted to the fact that even I have this unconscious bias. So a lot of the time, it seems like us women ourselves are actually kind of reinforcing everything that you mentioned because of the reasons you said. It seems like it's so deeply embedded and rooted in our culture, in our history, in our religions. Do you think we can maybe, is there realistically a way that we can unlearn it? And if so, how?
Great question. I mean, I'm sure people who are listening are trying to do just that, right? I think that the first step is learning and education and, saying the word out loud, masturbate. I think we're encouraged to think of that word as again, inappropriate or a curse word or, something that we just shouldn't talk about or shouldn't say. And so I think learning, educating yourself, reading books, listening to podcasts, kind of listening to the experts around masturbation is the first step, and then
Mm.
really doing some inner work to think through what are my own biases and where did they come from? And what do they mean? Where did I get that messaging from, right? Like typically
Mm.
it's our parents or our friends or movies or, a book that we read. And so more often than not, we need to be considering that and thinking to ourselves, is that true what I learned? Or is that just someone else's shame being thrust upon me? And so once you kind of are doing the learning, then really doing some deep inner work and thinking about where these messages came from, then we can start to really think about the pleasure piece and think like,
Yeah.
okay, well, maybe those messages aren't correct and they're just kind of the product of someone else's shame or a religious shame or a cultural shame. And now how can I really think about putting that to the side and not, necessarily thinking that that's not part of my journey, because a lot of us it is, and like there's no way around that and we have to accept that. But once we do that work to accept it, then it's moving forward and thinking about, okay, well, how do I figure out what I like? How do I figure out how to connect to my body? How do I figure out how to create a pleasure practice for myself that feels really, really good?
Yeah, you know what? I think you're absolutely right. It's about that shift of mindset. And for me personally, that's something I've had to really learn to do. And I still get really giggly when I do it. But like talking about doing it openly, I used to like not even mention it to my closest friends, but it got to a point, and I did the same thing with periods. I was like, you know what? I'm actually gonna go and I'm gonna own it. I'm actually gonna say it because I realized that I'm not hurting anyone. I'm not doing anything wrong. If anything, the opposite, right? So by actually
Yeah.
talking about it openly, I kind of removed that stigma for myself. But of course, it still brings that judgment from outside. But then I guess you can't really change others. And you know that old saying: if you want to change something, start with yourself in the mirror. I'm just going full on
No,
cliche. But
totally.
like for me, that was my first step.
I do think, just to comment on what you just said, I do think that you saying it out loud has definitely empowered other people around you to say it out loud. Like, I want to name that. I do really believe that naming things and saying them without shame as much as we can influences people and really empowers them to be able to do the same thing. And that's how
Mm.
these things, in a good way, spread.
I hope so. I mean, that wasn't my intention. I think if I can sort of like change myself slightly for better, I've achieved my goal. So I want to
Right.
talk to you a little bit about the science of self-pleasure. I love how open and so enthusiastic you are about this. I mean, you basically conducted a whole research on your own masturbation, which when I first read about it, I was like, yes, it even made me feel empowered for some reason.
Yeah.
I
I
want
mean,
to
yeah.
know what, yeah, it was just so, I mean, why the hell not? And it was just such a badass move. What made you want to turn something so private into a public open study?
Sure. So, some context, right? So, I'm a sex educator. I have my master's of public health. The intersection of science and pleasure has always been really interesting to me. A study like this was really in the cards for me, so to speak. And so, I think as a sex educator and someone with a platform, a lot of my sponsors are sex toy companies, lube companies, UTI medication companies, period companies, what have you. And one of my amazing sponsors is the iconic Magic Wand. And the Magic Wand has been one of my favorite toys since I started using toys about 10 years ago. And it was a real dream come true that they were interested in working with me. And so they're a super creative, open company. And I went to them after the first year of us partnering and said, what if I did my own experiment to kind of, destigmatize the idea of talking about masturbation, especially for women, and really did this intentional study that mixed science with pleasure. And I released the results to the public and like use that as a talking point to share the positive benefits of masturbation. And they said, two thumbs up, go for it. And so I did a single subject longitudinal study that was 3 weeks long. And I and my team designed the study. And the first week was abstinence week, so no touch of any kind. The second week was treatment week, which was using the magic wand every day. And the third week was sex as
Another
usual
day in the
week.
office.
Another day in the office. Yeah, getting paid to pleasure myself is hilarious, but it's true. And the third week was sex as usual week. So it was sex with or without my partner, sex with or without the magic wand, however, I would usually have sex. And I was trying to answer one main research question, which is what is the impact of daily magic wand use on my overall health and wellness? And so I recorded measures on 27 different variables during those 3 weeks, including sleep, productivity, mood, orgasm quality, orgasm frequency, happiness, pain, partner connectivity, and a ton more. And I really found that during Magic Wand Week, all of my quality of life indicators improved. And it really showed me that pleasure was such an important piece of my overall health and wellness. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this so much is because I feel like we don't give it the credit that it deserves. I feel like there's a lot of emphasis and money put into the Aura Ring to hack your sleep and nutrition and making sure that you're exercising, right? Like the exercise industry is $1 trillion industry, I'm sure. So I felt very much like it was important to me to shed light on the fact that pleasure is also a very important piece of your happiness and health puzzle. So that's why I wanted to do my own study, and then I'm happy to get into the bigger study that turned into. If you're interested in hearing about that.
So interested. Like this is honestly, this is all music to my ear. And let me quickly in brackets tell you why. Like I
Yeah,
grew up hearing all these myths, like there's so many myths, right? From, I don't know, like off the top of my head, I remember a teacher or a family member, I don't know who told me this, but this is quite a big thing in the society I was brought up in Iran, that if you touch yourself, this is how you basically bring in a jinn or a demon. Like that's how you manifest it. Like I was terrified. I remember like growing up, even as an adult, sometimes I get creeped out. There is this myth that if you touch yourself, especially for boys, too much, your eyesight goes bad, your vision, it
right.
impacts your vision, all of these things. So I actually genuinely grew up with all of these disinformation, misinformation, disinformation in my head. So hearing that based on actual research that masturbation isn't just, to relieve stress or to pleasure yourself momentarily, but it's also good for your sleep, good for your mental health, good for your well-being. So it's music to my ear hearing that. Tell me about the new research you've done.
Yeah. Well, first, I also just want to say, like, those myths, I'm sure, are still around. Like, people want to teach young people that it's disgusting if they touch themselves because they're uncomfortable with having a conversation with a young person to say, hey, it's normal if you want to touch yourself. You just make sure that you do it in the privacy of your own room. And if it's getting in the way of other activities, normal everyday life, then talk to me. But it's totally normal otherwise. Like we are not equipped to have those conversations with young people. And so that's why all of these myths are still around today. So you're definitely not alone in having experienced that, but I am sorry.
Quick question, like if as someone who is advocating for it, studying it, continuing the research around this, if you were to advise someone with a young child, what is the best way to have that conversation with them? Because even the conversation of how babies are made, it's still so awkward, right? So many people still like kind of go off the book, but at least it's more accepted. You still see it in movies. There is some sex education in schools. This is how babies are made. At least people say that or use condom, be safe. What do you think is the best way to talk to children about this then? At what age? What do you say to them? How do you not gross them out or traumatize them? And
It's a
also like actually help them?
It's a great question. I think that, the first reaction I have is the same thing that I had around masturbation, which is if you're a parent and you're interested, go to the experts who are talking about this. Listen to podcasts, read books, hear from the experts because you don't need to do this alone. There's a really great podcast that I recommend called This Is So Awkward. And it's a doctor and a parent who have a podcast who are experts who talk about, from ages 8 to 18, how to have conversations with your kids that might feel uncomfortable to you. So yeah, definitely recommend checking out resources, doing your homework. And know that you're not going to have all the answers all the time, and that's okay. Your child is not going to expect you to be the expert in every single thing. It is your job, though, to support them, to love them, and to make sure as best you can that they don't feel shame, because these messages that we give our kids, they have long lasting impacts, as we are talking about now. Like, we learned about things when we were younger that are still impacting our everyday lives now. And so those two pieces of information are very important. And that being said, I think that with your kid, you have to meet them where they're at. If they're asking you certain questions and you're not really sure why they're asking that, you can always probe and say, "Oh, that's interesting. Where did you hear that? Or why are you asking that?" In a curious way instead of a shamey, judgmental way. And if they are genuinely curious because they heard about it from school, or maybe they've been feeling certain things in their body, or maybe you saw them kind of like humping something, or whatever it is that's going on, you can always just meet your kid where they're at and tell them, like, "Hey, what you're doing is totally normal, but I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about touching yourself and some rules around that." And it's really important that you are the only person that touches yourself. You are the only person who can touch yourself. And when it comes to, naming their body parts and making sure they have the right anatomical names for them, right? Like, all of these conversations are happening when kids are 5, 6, 7 years old. And in addition to that, like I said before, you can mention it. Yeah, it feels really good to touch yourself. And it's really important that that's a private thing. Like, we do that in the privacy of our own room, so that we don't do that in front of anybody. We don't do that at school, like whatever the places that you're naming that you don't want them to do that at. And then you can say, if it feels good, then that's great. And if it is starting to not feel good, or it's feeling like you're feeling anxious, or you're starting to do that more than, usual, then you can talk to me about that, right? Like, you want to be open as possible with your kid, and make sure that they feel loved and supported, and always tell them the truth of, like, this is a very normal thing and most people do it. And they might be like, "God, get away. I don't want, mom, like, don't talk to me." Like, it's very possible that they're going to kick you out of their room. And that's okay. You can respect their boundaries, but you always tell them, "I'm here if you need me. I'm here if you have a question." So just being open and loving them.
Even I mean, I don't often think about kids because I don't have kids. I mean, the only time that, like, how we should be treating or talking to kids is I always go back to my own self when I was young. And this is genuinely the first time I'm thinking about children and talking about masturbation to them. I kind of wish that was done with me, because
Hmm.
that would have taken away the shame, and then perhaps those conversations. And even growing up, like, I remember when I was like in my 20s, I got drunk with my mom, which was really random,
Awesome.
and we were playing Never Have I Ever with like a bunch of cousins and stuff, and masturbation came up, and my mom was like, "Oh, never, oh my god, I would never." And like, that even like, I'm still ashamed by the fact that I even had that conversation with my mom. I get
Yeah.
that it's awkward, and I understand it, but I think it's more how you react to it, and that icky, shameful feeling you have within you when talking to your child is
Yeah.
what gets transferred, which brings us back to, what you were saying, start with yourself.
But I also want to caveat with, a few conversations that you have with your kid, you're not going to fully take away every ounce of shame that they have, right? Like, we still all exist in a society that is constantly telling us that we should feel shame for being sexual beings. And so all we can do is our best and give our kids books and resources, and let them watch, educational videos, and be an open resource for them so that they can go to you if they have questions. But all we're doing is trying our best.
So tell me, I massively interrupted you. I'm still dying to
No, no,
learn
this is
about
great.
your, tell me about your further findings.
Yeah, I would love to. So yeah, the single subject longitudinal study that I did with Magic Wand was a great success, for many reasons. I think I was able to show that I kind of showed with science. And of course, there are biases where I use my favorite toy, and the magic wand is paying me to make education. So of course, I wanted to do this again with many more people and make it a legitimate scientific study. And that's exactly what we did. We ended up getting 5,000 people to apply, and we picked randomly 1,000 people with vulvas 18 plus in the US or Canada, who were 200 people in each age cohort. So we had people spanning from 18 all the way to 81. 81 was our oldest participant. We had a very diverse sample. I believe it was 72% queer. It was about 32% or 38% gender expansive. So non binary folks, trans folks, genderqueer folks. And as I said, there were people in each age cohort. So very diverse age. And I think there were 38% people of color. And so we definitely, had a super diverse group of people who followed my exact study design. So it was 3 weeks, abstinence week, treatment week, and sex as usual week. And we had the same question of how does daily magic wand use impact your overall health and wellness? And there were so many surprises. I think there were a few kind of key takeaways that felt very familiar to me, but a few that I was personally surprised to see. So
Okay, start with the familiar ones, and then I want to hear the surprising ones.
okay, great. So the familiar one of the main takeaways is across the board, most quality of life measures were low during abstinence week. So, like, that to me felt very familiar because during abstinence week for myself, I was just like less happy. I was more stressed. I was, I feel like I kind of slept fine and was productive fine, but definitely was more stressed and less happy. And that was the same thing that happened with a lot of the participants. And I think what was a surprise though with abstinence week was that in our webinar that we had, where I think 500 of the 1,000 or 800 of the 1,000 people joined, it was a welcome webinar for us to be like, this is who we are, we're the researchers, if you have any questions. And we were flooded with questions about the definition of abstinence. A lot of people wrote in and were like, what if I give my partner pecks on the cheek, but it kind of arouses me? Like, does that count? And we are like, abstinence is kind of like no touching yourself, no touching your partner. And then someone wrote in the most surprising thing, which was, I'm a professional dominatrix and I have a non-sexual scene planned where I am going to be touching someone else's genitals. Does that count? And we were like, oh, we didn't anticipate this. Like, we had no
Did
idea
it?
how to answer. We did not anticipate like all of these different, specific nuanced questions about abstinence. So it really informed us for our next study. We really want to get clear on exactly what abstinence looks like for every single person. And also surprisingly, some people didn't follow through with the protocol, and they said, you know what, I tried, I couldn't be abstinent for 7 days. So it was kind of surprising how much people depended on sexual pleasure in order for them to be happy and healthy adults.
What were your findings when you had 1,000 people from 18 to 81? Which
Yeah.
did you design it that way? Where you like, we wanted to be like parallel. We wanted to be just exchange swap
No,
8
oh
and
no, we
1.
didn't. That was just pure luck.
So what did you find then? So you were telling me about the non-surprising ones that you sort of expected, and then the
Mhm.
surprising ones.
Yeah, so I guess a few more non-surprising ones is that magic wand use improved more than sexual wellness. Similar to my findings, magic wand use improved body image, confidence, distress, sleep quality, and happiness over the course of the entire study. So that was really great to see that people did have positive results from Magic Wand Week and also from Sex as Usual Week.
So, okay, question.
Yeah.
You kind of answered it now, but I just wanna learn more. What I'm trying to understand is it that masturbation is so good, or is it just generally taking the time to get aroused and to orgasm? that's good for you, whether with a sex toy or with a partner?
It's such a good question. I think that what we really are interested in is more studies like this to kind of ask these specific questions, because what we're inferring is that for different people, it's a different thing. I think for some people, it's the fact that they set aside time to think about their sexual pleasure and they journaled about it and they were more intentional about it. I think for some people, it was the act of masturbating. I think for some folks, it was the act of masturbating or mutual masturbation or engaging with the wand with their partner, right? So I think that like ultimately the reasons why each individual person felt happier, you know, less stressed, in a better mood, got better sleep. It depends on the person as to why. But our theory is that abstinence week sucked. And so when you're comparing, abstinence week to sexual weeks, there's going to be a difference. And our theory was correct. It's a great question as to like what exactly made their mood better. But I think that it's in no small part to the wand. I think that it would be interesting to do this kind of study with a different sex toy. It would be the next time that we did this study, we would be switching up the weeks so that it would be random which week you got when, so that we could really definitively say that, like, yes, abstinence week is the hardest week and these 2 weeks are, the most exciting for people. But on to a surprise. Week 3, actually, we call it the halo effect, had a halo effect where those quality of life measurements stayed high. And in fact, in some cases, continued to increase. So in my own study, the reason why I believe, and this was similar to what happened in my study, and this is for some quality of life measures. There were so many that we did, but essentially, some of the reasons that we're thinking about that is because pleasure begets pleasure. So I kind of assumed that because I was kind of like essentially for the sake of the study making myself engage in masturbation every day for 7 days, that it would lead me to not be horny. That's, let's take horniness as one of the measures, right? I thought, oh, because I'm forcing myself to do this, this is not going to be fun for me. And the opposite actually were true, went according to my own measurements. I actually got hornier as the week progressed. And it's because I think it's this idea that like pleasure begets pleasure. So I think it's a similar phenomenon of thinking about going to the gym, right? Like
Mm.
before you go to the gym, at least for me, I'm like, I don't want to do this. I would rather sit on my couch and watch Love is Blind or whatever kind of, crap that I want to do. And after I exercise, if I don't injure myself, 100% of the time, I'm happy I did it. Right. And I think that we can think about masturbation in the same way, where if we're looking at week 2 and we're engaging in using the magic wand every day, even if we're not in the mood, I think what happens in our bodies is enough to excite us and kind of have us float on to the next week, where our happiness is better, our sleep is better, our, relationship connectivity. So I think that that's our theory as to why the halo effect happened.
Did this horniness also, like, was that reflected when you brought in the other people, or was that only measured when you did the research on yourself?
Yeah, so it depends on the measurement, but a few measurements that you know rose from abstinence week to magic wand week and then stayed high. Self confidence is one of those examples. Focus is an example where it actually focus increased in the third week. Body appreciation is another example, and most of the quality of life measures were highest during Magic Wand Week. So I think that shows me that no, you don't actually need a partner in order to appreciate your body, in order to feel happy, in order to know what you like. And in fact, something that I teach through Sex Ed with DB is that even if you are partnered, masturbating should not fall by the wayside, because your connection to your body is sacred and deserves attention and love. And you deserve to have your own pleasure practice that is divorced not literally, but from your partner. And I think it's really an important myth to bust that sex with a partner is of a higher caliber than sex with yourself.
Do you know what? I totally agree, because I think there is so much to explore within fantasy, within touching yourself, learning new things about yourself, practicing what works for you. And it always baffles me when in some partnerships you see one of the couples, one of the partners, to get jealous or have an issue with the other one watching porn or touching themselves, as if like for some it actually falls under cheating. And I'm like, I just don't understand it. Really
Right.
glad that like hearing you say that, I think is really good, backed up by, obviously your research. I keep interrupting you every time you want to tell me about the surprising things. Tell me.
No, it's okay. No, it's okay. I mean, I kind of, before I finish the surprising parts of the study, I do want to make a note about the cheating thing. I think that in our society, we don't allow our partners to have their own like independent, shameless sex life with themselves, because we view partnership as we need to know everything about each other, and your fantasies need to be like told to me, and you can't watch porn, all of these things. And the reality is our partners should have sex lives with themselves that are independent of you. Like they should have porn that they watch by themselves. They should have fantasies that they think about by themselves. Like that is freedom. Like us allowing each of our partners to and ourselves to have the permission to engage in a sexual fantasy that doesn't include them is freedom, and like is a sign of a healthy relationship. Does that necessarily mean that we need to act on those fantasies? No. Most people's fantasies are not things that they actually want to act on. That's why they're fantasies. And so I think that that note to me is very, very important, because I think that that myth that masturbation is cheating is very pervasive, and it's specifically put on cis women in straight couples. And so I just want to shout out to all the cis women out there. If you want to watch porn and your partner is uncomfortable with that, then you should have a conversation with your partner, and say, like, this is kind
Mm.
of what I want to do, and this is my right, and I'm feeling controlled by your expectations.
And I'm talking anecdotally from my own personal observations and experiences, obviously, people around me. It's usually actually the woman who has an issue with the man watching porn or
Mm.
masturbating. Why do you think that's damaging?
I think that we are taught to feel like in a monogamous relationship that should be monogamous in any sense of the word. And I think that maybe women would feel threatened that the type of women or porn that their male partner is watching is very different than the sex life that they have with them or the body that they have. And so I imagine that women feel jealous or feel like they can't see themselves in his narrative of porn. That's like my guess. I think that that probably comes up for a lot of women, and maybe an insecurity of, oh, if he likes this and he wants to do that with me and I don't like it, what do I do? And the reality is you don't have to like it. Like it needs to be something that both of you independently pursue, and that's okay.
Yeah, and also from everything you're saying, it sounds like, and also I genuinely personally believe this. If you're able to have this relationship, sexual relationship with your body, with being able to pleasure yourself, continue exploring yourself and your own sexuality, as well as the one with your partner, it actually improves your relationship with them, because there are all these things you can bring into the table with each other, as well as everything that your studies has found. Your partner would be in a better mood, there would be better sleep, there would be a much more happier union, and also sex drives aren't always aligned. I am totally with you. It just really baffles me, but I do
Yeah.
understand it as well.
Yeah.
Your surprising
And
findings. Tell me, I'm
okay,
dying. Stop it. Stop
here's
it.
the surprising findings. Okay, here we go. So, for those folks who did have partners, partner connectivity was actually highest during Magic Wand Week, which is so fascinating and exciting because of the commonly held belief that sex toys negatively impact relationships. This actually showed the opposite, which is even though there was a sex as usual week, partnership connectivity ratings were highest during using the Magic Wand every day week, which is so fascinating.
That's so interesting. That's so counterintuitive. Why do you think that that's the case?
My understanding is when someone is showing a partner that, oh, this toy is making me feel really good, that probably is turning the partner on, and they're probably able to connect over each of their pleasure. I'm sure that people who use the magic wand every day used it, in conjunction with sex with their partner, and, basically to indicate that it doesn't really matter if, we're not having sex as we usually are. We have this like fun, potentially new toy. And so I think the novelty might be a piece there. And I just think that if we each think about our partners showing us that they're turned on and they're using something for their pleasure, that would excite us and make us feel more connected with them.
That's so interesting. Yeah, that is surprising. Do you know, I was actually going to ask, based on everything we've spoken about and this surprising finding, is the overdoing it? Because I think, we've all been there. Is that overdoing it? Can that perhaps become start interfering with everything that's good with it? Can start interfering with focus, with connection with partner, with sex, with productivity, etc.
So, the kind of rule of thumb is asking questions to yourself or with your partner if you are concerned about their amount that they are masturbating. The first question is, do they feel like they are harming themselves, right? Like, are they physically in pain? Is this affecting their mental health? More often than not, the answer is no. So, moving on to question two, are you harming somebody else? Like, is this making someone else uncomfortable? Am I doing this in a place that is inappropriate? Is there actual harm that I'm causing to somebody else? Most of the time, the answer is no. And thirdly, is the masturbation getting in the way of my daily activities and or responsibilities? So if you are in school, is it preventing me from going to school? Is it preventing me from doing my homework? Is it preventing me from going to work? Is it preventing me from living a normal life? And most of the time, the answer is no to all of these questions. And typically, you're good. Like the answer is you're probably fine. And again, like this idea that even if you're masturbating every day and you're saying like, "Oh, this is weird. It's bad that I'm doing this." If you're not hurting anybody or you're not hurting yourself and you're doing your responsibilities, you're probably just feeling shame about what messages that you've been taught and if you grew up in a religious background or what have you. And so I encourage folks to really like accept the fact that masturbation is healthy, it is normal. And if it is getting in the way of things or you're feeling like there's harm, then it's important to talk to somebody. It's important to talk to a mental health therapist, to talk to a sex therapist, talk to your doctor, because there are people who can be, who can have an unhealthy relationship with anything and masturbation included. So it is important to recognize that within yourself by asking those questions and seeking help if you need.
Well, not that I needed convincing, but you've reaffirmed that masturbation is good for you. It's good for you and your relationship. It has all of these benefits. Why do you think then so many couples are so bad at talking about it, particularly with each other?
I think that we're not taught how to do it. And so I really do encourage people listening to check in with your partner about masturbation. Ask them what they think about it. Ask them, first and foremost, think about how you think about it and what feels good about it and what doesn't feel so good about it. Think about your pleasure practice if you have one. And if you don't, think about implementing one. And it's really about intention and having the openness to have a conversation that might feel a little uncomfortable. But the more that you talk about it, the more comfortable you will be.
I loved what Danielle said, that everyone deserves to have pleasure, that pleasure is a human right. And taking time out to pleasure yourself, to rediscover what works for you to indulge in your fantasies, something we don't really do as adults anymore. Just feels like such a beautiful way of expressing that human right. And I'm definitely going to bear that in mind next time I feel a bit guilty or that, old voice of shame comes back. Speaking to DB hasn't really changed my position on masturbation. I mean, everything she said was very much aligned. If anything, she validated some of the things I sort of felt. She said things I was hoping to hear about the whole subject. But I guess speaking to her slightly changed the way I view it. Perhaps now I can see it as a part of my self-care routine. Who knows? I kind of like that. Thank you so much for staying with us with this, for some reason, awkward conversation. Why am I still finding it awkward to talk about masturbation? That's the problem. Hopefully, it will become less and less awkward with time. But thank you so much for sticking with us. I would love to hear your thoughts, your questions, your experiences, whether you agree with some of the things we spoke about, don't agree. Please visit us, leave a comment on our social media. We're on Instagram, on TikTok, and on YouTube. And I'll see you next week.